Alright, welcome back to Unit 2 Reformation Notes with Duncan. Here we go. Your content check. Number 1 is going to take us through the founders and pre-Luther reformists, humanists, if you will. We're going to talk a little bit about the printing press, Luther's revolt, what was going on there, and how come the princes helped Germany, or the German princes helped Luther stay alive. How do they save his bacon? So, problems facing the church on the eve of the Reformation. I suggest that you stop the video, press pause right now, and make sure you can go through all of these and just kind of have an understanding of what's going on here, because they tend to show up a lot in this section. We talked about this tree in class a little bit. Just want to make sure that, again, you stop it, you take a look at it, you kind of understand how it all starts, and that the Reformation we're really talking about here is in 1517 when Luther nails the 95 Theses to the wall. All of the other ones we're really not going to get into. We really don't talk about too much. Even the Great Schism of the 1300s, not the 1054 one there, where the Eastern Orthodox branches off. Even the one of the 1300s is just a precursor so that you understand how the Renaissance and the Reformation kind of get to where they are. They don't ask too many questions. It's just one of those help you understand kind of things. Condition of the church. This should not be a shock to you. With the Great Schism, the Babylonian captivity, so to speak, the humanists are going to break away, and again, we've talked about that. That is all review for us. 16th century signs of disorder. There are a couple in here I want to talk about. It says critics wanted reform, moral reform and administrative. We've talked a lot about the moral with them doing things that they shouldn't be doing and breaking the vows. But that clerical immorality, education of clergy, that we actually talked about in class, the education. They had stopped educating these clerks. These are supposed to be the people that are helping you lead good moral lives and getting into heaven, and they couldn't read and they were not educated. So that's actually going to end up being a favorable thing for Luther, because he is educated. So some of these things that he's saying, he's got an elevated position within his community because he was educated and he has background in providing evidence as to why he's right. So that's going to come in handy a little bit later. Ordination standards. Now remember, to be ordained is when a person takes the vows into the church and they become a priest. So that is one of the seven. That's the one of the 7 sacraments that's not followed by everyone. But they had lowered their standards, and more people are becoming priests, and they maybe shouldn't be, quite possibly. Absenteeism, that's exactly what it sounds like. You've got those absent leaders of the church because of pluralism, because of simony, and in some cases nepotism. So throwing a lot of vocabulary words at you. Make sure you've got those down. Make sure you understand having more than one office. I give the example in class of, what if I were teaching 6 different classes worth of students just so I could get more money on AP tests? How good of an education would your individual education be if I had 6 classrooms instead of just 1? Again, that vow of poverty being violated again. Popes and the members of the church, often members of the nobility. They live out in the countrysides in these great homes. I always make the joke that they're partying it up out there, lowering the disco ball, having buffets all the time, and throwing big dances and balls. And essentially it's not that, obviously, but they're living the good life, and then their mistresses out there, and they've got their children, their family that they can visit on the weekends. So the moral corruption was all over the place. Take a second to stop the video and check out this graphic. It does a good job of talking about the schism of 1054 and then getting into the branches of the different Protestant religions that come about because of Martin Luther. A quick word about the printing press. Again, it's something we've been talking about for a little while now. The printing press is going to make going to make the spread of the 95 Theses increasingly easy, and definitely something that everybody can get their hands on, which is obviously going to cause a big stir. Here's a handy dandy little copy of or picture of the printing press in Gutenberg down there in the bottom. And again, there's something in your book that we used to do in class, the global impact of the printing press. So drawing conclusions like how many books could a printing press produce in a month, and which areas of the world contributed technologies to Gutenberg's printing press. So you can do those on your own if you choose. But what we really care about is the impact of the printing press, because those Renaissance ideas are spread, including humanism, individualism, more books, so more literacy. Again, it's slow but sure, but the increase in literacy is there. The ideas of Christian humanism spreading. And look, it says having an impact on society, politics, and religion. Hopefully those are sparking some words. Those are specific words that should spark specific things for this class. If you didn't say so political, economic, social, then shamey shame, because that's what everything in this class boils down to. And usually I like to have a quick discussion. Few inventions of human history's had as great an impact as the printing press. This used to be an old FRQ question. They're starting to get away from it a little bit now, but it's food for thought. Essentially, it's kind of like what social media has done for the internet. If you go from the Stone Age and then all of a sudden, bam, social media, this is the kind of impact that the printing press, and maybe that was a bit of an exaggeration, Stone Age to social media, but you've got this huge impact that is happening at the same time all of these ideas are springing up with the Renaissance. They are going to have the Catholic Church is going to have a little bit of a comeback in the late 15s and early 1600s, because again, Europe is deeply religious, and there are some folks who are trying to get a resurgence of that going. And every once in a blue moon, you see something about this Brethren of the Common Life. It's an organization to minister to the poor. Essentially, these people did everything short of being ordained and taking oaths. They lived like priests, they acted like priests, they vow of poverty, chastity, etc. They went around preaching to people. They were helping the poor, so doing everything essentially except for taking the ultimate vows. And the Lateran Council, this is the fifth, for those of you who go and look up Lateran Council on Wikipedia, the fifth was instituted by Julius II. Hey, we knew him. He was the guy that commissioned Michelangelo to do the Sistine Chapel. Well, he's also going to try and institute some reforms in the Catholic Church to end corruption. Obviously not as much as he could, but he does make attempts in the 1500s to clean the church up. Other problems, poorly educated clergy. We've talked about that. And again, Luther looks like a genius because he can read and he can write and he can debate. Simony, pluralism, indulgences, all of this stuff, extravagance, immoral clergy. We've talked about all of these, so make sure that none of these are a surprise for you. Early movements in the late Middle Ages, all these pre-Luther people like Wycliffe, England. Look at the dates. He lives 1329 to 1384, questioning the church, questioning transubstantiation. That is something that we are going to have to nail down, particularly in content check number 2. All of these things he questioned. And again, he isn't going to be persecuted while he's alive, but his lollards are. And Jan Hus, we know what happens to him. Saying again, the authority lies in the Bible. Clergy is immoral. That the followers should take up the cup and wafer themselves, being priests unto themselves, if you will. When we talk about cup and wafer, we're of course talking about the sacraments. And the Council of Constance is going to say, heretic, burns him at the stake, and that's going to result in a long revolt. You have this chart in your book. Make sure you take a look at it. I cannot stress that enough. I gave you the political, economic, and social stuff for this Reformation. Make sure you take a look. So, quick background on Luther. He was originally going to be a lawyer. His father put him through law school so that he could become a lawyer, and then essentially his dad would live off, the money. Luther was supposed to take care of him after that. It was his retirement plan. And then Luther, one day, he gets caught in this lightning storm. He's on his way home, and this is like no joke, this is the story. He literally made one of those promises. Dear Lord, if you'll please just let me live, I'll join your church, I'll do anything. And so essentially, when he lives, he goes and says, I'm a man of my word. So he joins the Augustinian order. He becomes a monk, professor of religion, but he's going to be the guy that says faith and faith alone. The selling of indulgences set him off, just like we talked about previously in class. Albert of Hohenzollern, this is a territory in Germany, he wanted to have a third bishopric, a third office of bishop. So he borrows the money from a Northern Renaissance banking family. If you said fuggers, then you were right. In order to pay this back, he's given permission to sell indulgences. Some of the money will go to Rome, the other will go towards paying back his loan to the fuggers, but again, Rome wants that money, and if you don't know what Rome needs it for, then make sure you get that under control before the test. Now, Tetzel's going around. This was seen in the little clip that we showed you, and this is one of his famous sayings. It's usually associated with him. As soon as gold in the basin rings, a soul to heaven sings. And a basin is just a cup or, a big bowl. And essentially your sink is a water basin. Okay? So as soon as you put that gold in there, a soul to heaven sings. Soul to heaven springs, sometimes I hear it. But essentially, put the money in the cup, and hey, then you can have your relative spring into heaven. Notice that he is a Dominican friar. And Luther was a what? Yep, he was an Augustinian, so make sure you've got that down, because as we talked about in class, originally Leo's just going to think, the two monk orders are squabbling again. So the 95 Theses, and this is one of those dates you've got to know, October 31st, 1517, is nailed to the castle church wall, or the castle church door, in Wittenberg, or Wittenberg, however you want to say it, and it is that is just how you challenge somebody to a debate. It is like posting on Twitter, starting a Twitter fight. Immediately the conversation begins. So, his proposition on indulgences, he raises questions. He rejects that salvation can be achieved through good works. Make sure you stop the video and watch this and understand what Luther is saying here. So, the main arguments, and these are the ones that I made in class. How come all this money should go back to Rome? What's the deal? Why do we got to keep sending our hard-earned money back there? And if the Pope has control over purgatory, how come he doesn't just let everyone out? How come it's just the people who can pay for this indulgence? And he's going to say he can't. There's no way, because after all, the Pope did not give the penalty. He did not put people in hell. He can't therefore take it away. That is God's job and God's job only. And just to go back and make a point here, he is forming his debate. This is what educated priests can do, as opposed to ones who just listen to what the people above them said. The course of the movement, this shouldn't probably be a shocker. Printing press spreads things quickly. The Dominicans want to charge Luther as a heretic. They cannot stand him. Pope Leo, in the beginning, just thinks it's an argument. And notice there's a star there. There's usually a question on the test about this. So Luther gets radical. He starts engaging in public debates. He's essentially saying you shouldn't have killed Jan Hus. He knew what he was talking about, so they're going to start calling him names like Hussite. He's going to make these books, to write these books. Now, you've got to know these books. I have a tendency to put these on the test, and I spread them out between the different versions, so you've got to know all three of them, because they each have their own individual purpose. The first one is addressed to a Christian nobility. Now, why would he focus in on the people with money? I wonder. And then finally secondly, he attacks that whole Babylonian captivity, that stuff that was going on with the popes and the Great Schism, and attacks those sacraments. And then finally, the liberty of a Christian man. This is where he gets into the heart of his beliefs. He goes into faith and faith alone. So make sure you know all three of these. I cannot stress that enough. Quick little quote from his book on Christian liberty. Again, that, and the just shall live by faith, faith and faith alone. So, again, excommunicated in 1521, we saw this slide in class. Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, declares him an outlaw at the Council of Worms, the Diet of Worms. And there's the quote that we talked about in class, where again he's like, I can't go against my conscience. To do so is neither right nor safe. And then because he knows how El Scrudo he is, he says, God help me, amen. So, he becomes a wanted man. I told you he hides out with the Elector of Saxony. What was that guy's first name again? If you said Frederick, then nice job. He translates the Bible into German, and sometimes this guy, Philip Melanoma, I can't even pronounce that man's name, he works with Luther to create these new church ideas free from papal control. Every once in a while, Philip Melanoma there, he gets on the test, so make sure that you, or at least aren't freaked out whenever that name pops up. Lutheranism, at its core, we talk about this during the religions and on the religions matrix. 2 sacraments, baptism and communion, are the only 2 needed. He rejects the idea of transubstantiation. He says that Christ is already present in the bread and the wine, and does away with the whole celibate life. He's going to eventually marry, actually. So anyway, a happy ending. Luther marries the former nun. He has many children, and that's where we get into Luther and his wife becoming role models for the good, proper Protestant family. The success of the Reformation, it spreads everywhere. Look at all those countries that are going to adopt Protestantism, and of course we know that this is kind of like the beginning of the end, if you will, of the Holy Roman Empire. Why was it so successful? And this gets into another question from your study guide. The ideas of the Church of Luther were socially conservative. Socially conservative. Luther is going to say things like, we're a priesthood of all believers and we're all equal within the church, meaning we should be able to read in the vernacular. We should be able to do these things. We don't need the church or the priest to do it for us. We can do it ourselves. Well, what's going to eventually spring off of that is going to be the peasants, who are going to take that idea of religious egalitarianism. Egalitarianism is fancy schmancy word for rights, natural individual rights, things like that, and ways of voting, and you can Google it if you want a little bit more precise definition, but we're talking about the rights of people here, where people have rights, not necessarily a lack thereof, and the king is everything. So Luther rejects this German Peasants Revolt. He does not like what they take, the meaning that they take from his teachings. He's teaching religious egalitarian, religious equality. Alright? Religious equality. They're going to take it to mean social equality as well, and start turning against the very princes that are keeping Luther safe. We talked about how those princes, because they were seeing dollar signs and they now were taking the Pope out of the equation, really liked Luther's ideas. And when Luther finds out that these peasants have taken this different meaning, he's appalled. He is It says right there, he responds violently with his reaction and in his writings, because he was not trying to tell them that he should he wasn't trying to uproot the entire society. He wasn't even trying to uproot religion. That's essentially what happened. He is trying to criticize the church in order to get them to change with his 95 Theses, and eventually it's going to cause a split. And when he sees these peasants taking a social equality stand, he is not a happy camper. So he's more socially conservative. Sometimes people think, oh, because he enacted all this change, that he's this wild liberal person. But when it came to the rights and the princes and maintaining social order, he was not an advocate of change, not at all. He was squarely in the camp of the princes. So, and that's again, now that we've got one more thing down there at the bottom, that's again why the princes really saved his bacon. He encourages the German princes to go take back those Catholic lands of the church that were in their territory, so they really, really love him. Politically speaking, the Holy Roman Empire is just not holding up pretty well. We saw Charles V's huge empire. He is at war currently during this time period with France and the Ottoman Empire. So think about this. You're at war on your left, you're at war on your right, east and west. You're at war all around on all of your sides. And now to top it all off, your princes that you look to for strength and power and that kind of keep and hold the glue together, they're starting to get their knickers in a twist too. They want reform. They want change. So if you've got problems and you're fighting all the people around you, you definitely don't want problems in your own backyard as well. So think about it. If you're in the middle of a cafeteria fight, your friends are supposed to have your back. Alright, they're supposed to help you. They're not supposed to sit there and go, well, I'll help you if you buy my lunch tomorrow. And that's essentially what the princes are trying to pull off here. At the same time, Charles V is fighting outside forces. He's got to keep his inside forces, his friends, close. He's got to keep them happy. And so he's eventually going to have to sign the Peace of Augsburg and make those princes happy. And he has to do that, or he risks losing his whole empire to France and to the Ottoman Empire. So he's forced to sign that Peace of Augsburg. Now it's very important here that you realize it grants legal recognition of which religion. If you said Lutheranism, nice job. It's only Lutheranism. No other religion. You've got two choices if you're in the Holy Roman Empire and granted by the Peace of Augsburg. And that typically comes up. This is a very important point. The Peace of Augsburg of 1555, you can remember that, it's all fives. The Peace of Augsburg only allows either Catholicism or Lutheranism. And the princes get to choose. The princes get to choose. His region, his religion. And so there's a fancy-schmancy Latin term that also means this, that I like to throw on tests every once in a while. Make sure you're paying attention. His region, his religion. Whatever the prince chooses, whatever religion the prince is, that's the religion of his region. So if a prince wants to convert to Lutheranism, then his whole territory can. But we're not talking about any of the other religions, especially not from our religions project. So Calvinism, no. Anabaptist, no. Lutherans only. 1555, the Peace of Augsburg. Here is the House of Habsburg map again, in case you need a refresher. And that is the end of content check number 1.